My name is Claire Halverson. I worked as a ranger in Olympic National Park for almost 14 years. I didn't start in search. I started in interpretation, giving talks about salmon and nurse logs and glaciation to kids who mostly wanted to poke banana slugs and ask if bears could open car doors. Back then, I thought the worst thing the forest could do was soak through your socks. Then a family got turned around on the Hoh River Trail and spent a night out in December rain. They came back shivering and embarrassed, but alive. I was on the crew that walked them down. The mother couldn't stop thanking me, even though I hadn't done anything except lend her my extra hat. When we got them to their car and the little boy fell asleep with his face mashed against the window, I felt something click into place. Purpose, I guess. I applied for the search and rescue team the next season. Rope training, navigation, wilderness medicine. You'll see people on the worst days of their lives, my supervisor said. Try not to make it yours. For a while, that worked. I kept a small notebook in my pack, same as everyone else. Times, locations, grid assignments, notes about sign, broken twigs, scuffs, a candy wrapper snagged on the route. On the inside cover, I wrote 3 words that an old SAR tech had told me over coffee my first week. Terrain, weather, choices. Respect those 3 and you can usually explain what happened, even if you don't like the answer. Wrong turn at the junction. Storm cell that wasn't in the forecast. Pride that made someone push past the stop point instead of turning back. For the first few years, every loss, every rescue by the skin of our teeth fit somewhere on that triangle. I could sit in a fluorescent lit debrief room and point to the map and say, here's where they left the trail, or this is where the creek undercut the bank. It didn't make the grief smaller, but it put it in a shape I could hold. Then came the ones that didn't fit. The first was a woman named Mara. It was late September, the kind of day hikers think is perfect and rangers know is dangerous. Clear, cool, with that particular kind of thin light that makes distance look closer than it is. She was camping alone at Deer Park, a ridge site with big views and paper-thin tent pads perched above the tree line. She checked in with the host when she arrived, paid for 2 nights, said she planned to take a day hike up toward Obstruction Point and back. She never came back. Her Subaru sat in the loop, windows fogged from the inside the next morning. At first, everyone assumed she'd gone for an early hike. By noon, the host radioed us. By 2, we were running a hasty search along the obvious routes. The road, the ridge trail, the social paths that sneak off toward viewpoints. Every bit of sign we found early on made sense. Boot prints in the dust at the overlook, a snack wrapper in the grass, a single trekking pole scuff where the trail narrows along a steep side hill. I could picture her there, pausing to look down into the valley where low cloud pooled like milk. We found her first campsite neat as a catalog photo, bear can in the shade, stove windscreen folded, map weighted with a stone. Inside the tent, her sleeping bag was zipped up to the pillow. No sign of struggle, no rush in the way things were left. She'd gone for a walk and never returned. That happens. People slip. People sit down and don't get back up. On the second day, though, one of the flankers called out, "Got something." We came over to see. It was her hat. Same brand and color as the one in the photo her sister had emailed us. Wool, navy blue, with a little leather patch on the front. It was sitting dead center on a flat rock a few yards off the trail. And not dropped, placed, perfectly centered like the dot in a target. I crouched, scanned for tracks. Nothing. No disturbed moss, no dirt smears on the stone. Just the hat, slightly warm to the touch in the cool air. "Probably blew there," one of the volunteers said, though there wasn't enough wind to move a leaf. We bagged it, logged the coordinates, moved on. An hour later, another team found one of her socks stuck to a heather branch at head height, cuff folded like it had come from a drawer. Mid-weight hiking sock, still faintly damp but not from rain. No tracks leading to or away from it. We added that to the growing list of objects that weren't where they should be. The dog team got nothing. The shepherd worked circles, then spirals, then finally planted his feet, sat down hard and whined. I watched his handler kneel beside him, rubbing his ears with the kind of worried tenderness you usually reserve for people. At dusk on the third day, fog came up out of the valley in stiff white bands, licking at the ridge. Radios crackled to life, everyone reporting their locations before we pulled back for the night. I was alone on a short spur, a little rise with a view west, when my radio hissed and then repeated my own last transmission back to me. Same words, same cadence, but half a second delayed. It shouldn't have been possible. Our system could get scratchy, sure, but it didn't echo. Base, confirm last? I asked. You're clear, Claire. Dispatch answered, same as always, her voice perfectly normal. You didn't replay anything? Negative. I wrote it off as a glitch and didn't write it in the log. The things you choose not to write down are their own kind of list. We never found Mara. Official cause, presumed fall or environmental exposure, remains unrecovered. I added the file to the drawer with the others and tried not to feel the weight of all that word unrecovered didn't say. On the back of my notebook under terrain weather choices, I wrote, hat placed on rock, sock folded on branch, dog loses interest. That should have been my first clue to stop looking for triangles. The next case that stuck came the following summer, down in the Kinol drainage. Kid this time, 9 years old, named Dustin, brown hair, missing front tooth, Spider-Man shirt. His family was staying at one of the drive-in campgrounds near the river. Willoughby, the one with moss-sagging maples and campsites squeezed in like teeth in an old jaw. It was busy as hell, generators buzzing, kids on bikes, somebody's Bluetooth speaker leaking country music through the trees. He was last seen riding loops around their site while his parents worked on dinner. One of those moments you could sketch in a few lines. A father shaking charcoal into a grill, a mother digging in the cooler, a kid's red helmet flashing past in circles. They looked away for long enough to argue about who forgot the mustard. When they looked back, no Dustin, no bike. Every ranger who's worked long enough has some version of that story. 99 times out of 100, the kid is found within 10 minutes. Down at the river throwing rocks, in the next campsite over showing off his bike, sitting on a log crying because he turned around and couldn't see his mom. We started with the campground. Whistles, pots banged with spoons, people calling his name until the sound of it turned thin and brittle. I checked the obvious hazards. Restrooms, the river access points, the big old cedar that had fallen in a windstorm and trapped a hollow of space underneath. I knelt and shined my headlamp into that dark slit of air, already composing the words I'd have to say, if empty. At dusk, a volunteer spotted his bike. It was leaned, carefully, against a cedar on a narrow game trail behind the amphitheater, 10 minutes walk from his parents' site. Not thrown down in a hurry, not crashed, just stood there, front wheel turned slightly, like someone had walked it up and parked it. The helmet was hooked over the left handlebar. The strap was buckled, tail tucked neatly into the keeper loop, the way you might do for a kid who hasn't learned to deal with dangling ends. A 9-year-old does not tidy his helmet like that. I walked slow circles, scanning for scuffs, drag marks, anything. The dirt looked like any other bit of duffed-up trail. No clear sign. Behind the tree, the trail dead-ended in a wall of ferns and salmonberry. No path beyond, no logical destination. Just green. The dog team arrived as the light died. The handler held out a t-shirt from the family's laundry bag, wadded tight. "This his?" he asked. The mother made a sound I didn't want to interpret and nodded. The dog sniffed, hackles twitching, then pulled hard, then faltered. He wandered in a wide arc once, twice, circling farther each time, tail lowering. At the end of the third loop, he lay down, head on his paws, and looked away from the bike. I'd never seen him refuse like that. Around 2 in the morning, a squall blew through. No storm in the forecast, but the canopy roared, and cold rain came in sideways sheets for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped like someone threw a switch. By dawn, the ground was mostly dry except for beads of water on spider webs and the glossy tops of salal leaves, almost as if the storm had skipped along in bands, touching some places and not others. On the far side of the campground, an older man named Hal, retired teacher, the kind who still wore a whistle on a lanyard like muscle memory, found a child's t-shirt folded on a mossy log. It was the right size for Dustin, faded red generic brand, not the Spider-Man shirt from the photo. The shirt was warm to the touch in the morning chill. When I lifted it, the moss underneath was bone dry. No damp impression, no dark patch. It was as though the rain had politely parted around that log and then closed back up. We never found him. Not a shoe, not a scrap of fabric, not some ghastly confirmation down in the river. Just a bike, a helmet buckled too neatly. A shirt that shouldn't have been where it was or as warm as it was. I wrote the official report the way we're trained to do. Time last seen, initial response, resources deployed, environmental factors. I used phrases that sat heavily because they were all we had. Extended search with negative results. Later in my notebook, I crossed out terrain weather choices and wrote beneath, bike leaned, helmet buckled, dog disinterested, localized storm, dry log, warm shirt. Once you write one list like that, your eyes change. You stop seeing only the slope and the creek in the distance. You start spotting arrangements. A spoon dangling from fishing line at eye level in the middle of a stand of furs, turning in wind that doesn't touch anything else. 3 stones stacked on the white stripe in the middle of the road at a pullout no one uses. The top one faintly warm on a cold night. Flagging tape tied in a pattern your crews don't use, in a drainage no one has worked in years. I told myself people did it. People could do it. That made it manageable. The alternative, that the landscape itself was making gestures, was not something I was ready to entertain. Then came the runner. Mid-October, shoulder season. He was a serious trail runner, the kind who posts his routes in splits online. We had his Strava track from the previous week, his Instagram with pre-run photos. He signed out at the wilderness office for a long loop up near Seven Lakes Basin, promised his girlfriend he'd text from the ridge before he lost cell coverage, and headed off in a blaze of neon and optimism. The last photo he sent was from High Divide, a crooked shot of boots and sky in the distant blue-white smear of Mount Olympus. His caption, "One more lap before the snow." He was seen by 2-day hikers heading west along the ridge around noon. They described him as moving easy, poles like metronomes. He never came back to his car. Day 1, we hammered the obvious lines. Ridge trail, feeder paths, the gullies where overeager hikers sometimes bail when they spook themselves to looking down. The weather stayed irritatingly benign, fog drifting in and out, but no serious wind, no storm to pin blame on. On day 2, one of the grid teams found his left shoe. Wow, it was perched on a rock just off the trail, toe pointing down slope, laces double knotted. Not tossed in panic, not slipped off mid-scramble. Set there, balanced. 2 switchbacks below, half buried in loose gravel beside a lingering patch of snow. We found the right shoe. It was on its side, heel slightly crushed, insole half pulled free, curled like a tongue. Prints led to the first shoe. Small, tight trail runner footprints, heel toe, heel toe. After that, nothing reliable. The substrate changed to a nasty mix of decomposed granite and duff that doesn't hold sign well. Every few yards we'd see something that might have been a barefoot slide or might have been just the way the hillside shed its skin. Our county helicopter came up to run a grid from the air. On his second pass, the pilot radioed down, asking if we'd updated our map elevations. Negative, I said, shielding my eyes against the rotor wash. Well, my altimeter thinks I'm 50 feet underground, he said. He laughed a little to show he wasn't spooked, but his eyes flicked up to the ridge with that quick calculation pilots do. Where can I put this thing down if it stops behaving? We chalked it up to pressure changes, some freak inversion. Later, when he landed in the meadow to let the engine cool, he tapped the panel with his knuckles. The needle on the gauge shivered for a second and then steadied. Day 3, someone found his GPS watch. It lay on a flat rock about chest height on a slope above one of the tarns. Again, not dropped. Display facing sky, band tucked underneath like someone had set it out for a photograph. The time on the stopped face, 12:17 p.m., a minute after his last post, if the EXIF data on that photo was right. When one of the techs tried to wind it, the second hand ticked once, the hour hand gave a tiny tremor, and a mist bloomed under the glass like breath on a window. Then nothing. The field report used phrases like possible separation from equipment and confounding terrain. My private note said, shoe balanced, laces tied, second shoe in gravel, altimeter anomaly, watch staged, face fogged from inside. After that, the cases stopped being separate in my mind. They started to feel like chapters in the same book I didn't want to be reading. Some of the old-timers had been walking those pages longer than me. There was one, a retired ranger named Cal, who'd worked the park back when fire lookouts still sat in towers all summer, instead of watching lightning strikes on a screen. He came by HQ one sodden afternoon with a box of old maps and incident reports, dropping them on the table with the care of someone handling a reluctant animal. Figure you kids should have these, he said, before they become spreadsheet ghosts. He smelled like wood smoke in hospital soap. Later, in the quiet of the gear room, I unrolled one of his maps. The familiar contour lines were overlaid with pencil marks, tiny notes near creek crossings, hatch marks where boot tracks had faded interestingly, his words in tight, neat script, circles drawn around small meadows and unnamed knolls. Some of the circles were tight, little halos. A few were wider, cutting across drainages and vegetation types in a way geology never would. One ring sliced through 3 different life zones, a swampy alder tangle, a mossy bench, a scree slope, like it didn't care what the ground was, only that it fell within some shape. He'd labeled a few of the small circles. Feel off here. No bird's dusk. Don't camp. The bigger ones had no explanation. Just graphite ovals, and next to one, a small knife nick in the paper where the tip had pressed too hard. I asked him about them when we happened to be in HQ at the same time, both hiding from a day when the mountain was lost in its own clouds, and tourists stood at overlook railings, staring into blank white like it might clear if they wished hard enough. He stirred his coffee with the knife because all the spoons had migrated into various lunches. Those, he said, glancing at the circles as if he'd forgotten they were there, just places that don't behave right. Don't behave how? He thought for a minute. Outside, the rain tapped the windows like impatient fingernails. A butterfly batted itself stupid against the glass, obsessing over a sky it had never reached. Sometimes, he said slowly, you walk into a patch of woods and everything feels like it's waiting. Not for you exactly, just waiting. Other times the sound doesn't travel right, or your watch won't keep time in one little clearing, but works fine 10 steps away. You start to feel like you're the wrong frequency. He shrugged. You can't write wrong frequency on an incident form. So you draw a circle and remind yourself not to linger there. Keep moving if the birds stop. I laughed then, because what else do you do? You'll know that one, he added, tapping the knife nick with the blade. When the air tastes stale, even with wind in your face. Don't loiter. Nothing out there loves you enough to let you loiter. I gave him the polite little smile you give older colleagues when they slip sideways into superstition. He caught it, of course. Men like him catch everything. You don't have to believe me, he said. Just don't test it on purpose. I didn't plan to. And then months later, I realized I was standing inside that circle. We'd had a bad run. 2 mushroom hunters who'd walked out of their usual patch and into something else entirely. A solo backpacker who'd vanished between 2 switchbacks in open forest, like someone had grabbed the film of the world and cut a frame. The mushroom hunters were brothers, both in their 60s, both methodical to a fault. They left a note under their wiper at a spur road turnout on the north side. Back by 1800. If not, please call. Wife's number. A courtesy, old school and sweet. They didn't come back. We followed their flagging tape into the woods. Thin curls of pink and orange tied at eye level. Their dog's tracks stitched the road and the duff, back and forth like knitwork. At the second flagged tree, I smelled lighter fluid. No smoke, no char on the trunks, just a faint petroleum tang. On the ground, a ring of dead needles, darker than everything around them, as if something had been set alight and then extinguished without leaving scorch. At 9:03 p.m., one of the brothers' phones pinged the tower. 6-second call to his wife. She heard wind a flap like snapping canvas, then a click. The location put him on a slope we all knew too well. Steep, messy, good at swallowing. We went anyway. We found the younger brother around 1 a.m, sitting on a stump beside a creek. His hands lay neatly in his lap. Mud streaked his knees. His eyes were blown wide, pupils swallowing his irises even in the beam of my headlamp. "I lost him," he said. "I lost him." He wouldn't take a blanket. Every time we tried to drape one around his shoulders, he winced and batted our hands away like the fabric burned. "We got turned around," he said. "I knew where we were 100 times, and then suddenly I didn't." "Where did you last see him?" He pointed at the creek. "Right there," he said. "Right there and then not." We searched for 3 more days in rain, so steady the hemlocks dripped like IV bags. On day 3, I found his older brother's watch nestled in a burl on a young maple, half swallowed by the tree like it had grown around it. The watch had stopped at 10:04 p.m. I wrote that time down because that's what you do. Inventory. Data. But something in me bristled. 10:04. The trail runner's watch had stopped at 12:17, but the helicopter altimeter had flicked weird at 10:04 on its run. I told myself I was seeing patterns in numbers because humans are built for that, even when we shouldn't be. On day 5, we found the older brother. He lay on a patch of bright moss in an opening we'd flown over twice and walked through once already. No branches overthrown, no sign of recent disturbance, just a man suddenly there where there had been no one before. He was barefoot. His boots and socks were nowhere to be found. His feet were clean, too clean for ground that wet and churned. His rain pants were unzipped and turned inside out, peeled down around his knees like someone taking off a tight, hateful layer. In his right hand, he held a short, smooth stick. Not a walking stick, a fidget, worn from being turned in a palm over hours. The dog that had been working that flank bristled when we approached. He stopped 3 yards from the body and sat, refusing to cross some invisible line. When his handler coaxed him, he whined and turned his head away, pawing at his own muzzle. The coroner wrote hypothermia on the form. He wasn't wrong. People undress at the edge of freezing because their nerves get tricked into a final cruel misreading. He didn't have to explain why we'd walked that patch of moss before and seen nothing, why the dog refused, why the stick was there at all. That night back at HQ, I dug out Cal's old map. The creek, the mossy opening, the spot where the dog sat down. They all sat neatly inside one of his big, unlabeled circles. The one with the knife nick. Piece by piece, season by season, my notebook filled with small entries that didn't fit on official forms. Air tastes stale in one spot, normal 10 feet away. Radio repeats my own voice with half-second lag. 2 whistles heard with no source. Flagging tape appears where we didn't put it, tied in our exact style. Watch stops, then works again outside a small radius. Dog hides eyes with paw when asked to work one gully. I didn't show those pages to anyone at first, not because I thought I was crazy, but because I wasn't ready to see reflected in someone else's face that we had a column of something we couldn't name. The call that finally pushed me to the edge started as ordinary as any of them. A father and his 15-year-old son out for a weekend at Solduc. They'd hiked up to Deer Lake, fished, camped, texted a picture to the boy's mother of marshmallows charring over the fire. They were due back at the trailhead by mid-afternoon Sunday. By evening, the car was still there. Note under the wiper in the father's handwriting. If we're not back by dark, we've taken shelter. Don't worry. It's always the ones who tell you not to worry. Weather moved in faster than planned. The forecast had mentioned a chance of showers. Instead, we got a cold front that barreled in low and mean. Visibility went to hell in an hour. We launched a late search anyway, because that's what you do. You don't wait until morning if you can help it. Darkness is its own terrain. We split into 2 teams. One followed the main trail up. I took a small crew along a higher, rougher route, a narrow bench above the valley that offered better vantage points if the ceiling lifted. By the time we hit the bench, the rain had done that unnerving thing it sometimes does out here. Stopped everywhere except in certain pockets where you could hear it hissing in the trees, but not feel it on your face. My jacket was dry, my boots were damp from earlier, but no new water slicked the leather. Then the air went flat. It wasn't the silence you noticed first. It was the way my breath tasted. Stale, like air in a closet that hasn't been opened all winter. The hair on my arms prickled under my base layer. Wind still moved the branches above, fine, shivery movement, but nothing touched my cheeks. If I hadn't seen Cal's knife mark on the map, I might have ignored it, might have written it off as nerves. Instead, my heart did a real heavy thud. I kept walking because that's what you do when every instinct says freeze. You move. 50 paces into the talus, I saw the hat. Baseball cap, navy with a white logo, perched on a rock at knee height, brim perfectly horizontal, beads of water along the edge that didn't match the dryness of the stone. I bagged it, tagged the location. 2 rocks farther, I saw the bandana, folded in a clean rectangle on a slab, edges aligned, damp only on one side. I didn't touch it. My radio clicked. "Claire," it said in my voice. No call sign, no background noise. Just my own tone, speaking my own name back to me. Then in dispatch's voice, the radio said, "Hold your position." I froze. I hadn't keyed the mic. The little orange transmit light had not lit. "Dispatch, confirm last transmission?" I asked, thumb pressed hard on the button, just to feel something I controlled. "Say again?" she replied. In the background, I could hear other chatter, real-time responses. Her voice was live somewhere else. "I just got an instruction to hold my position," I said. "Negative from us," she said. "That didn't come from this channel." Wind moved across the bench in that moment, but I didn't feel it. I should have turned around then. I know that, sitting here at a kitchen table miles and years removed. But in the moment, training leans harder than dread. The father and boy were out there somewhere, maybe hypothermic, maybe injured, maybe needing the exact kind of stubbornness that had gotten me into this line of work. So I did the thing I knew how to do. I pushed on. The stones under my feet were wrong. Some of them clinked normally when they shifted. Others gave with a dull, muffled sound, like they were styrofoam painted to look like rock. The pocket of stale air clung to me. My tongue tasted dust that wasn't there. "Just keep going until it breaks," I told myself out loud, because sometimes hearing your own voice helps. My boot rolled on a loose rock. Pain lanced up my ankle. I swore out loud and creatively. The sound came out too crisp in the dull air, like it had been recorded in a studio and played back at high volume. 30 steps later, I stepped out of it. Wind hit my face. Real wind, cool and sharp. The taste of rot and soil and the faint metallic tang of distant snow returned. Somewhere below, a thrush called. Behind me, the stones and scrub of the bench looked exactly as they had from the other side. Ahead, in the crumb halts at the edge of the pocket, a glove hung from a branch. Not dropped, threaded. The branch had been bent, fed through the wrist and released, leaving the glove pointing down like a hand indicating a path. It was a small glove, kid-sized wool, dark blue with a single stripe near the cuff. I didn't want to touch it. I did anyway. The wool was dry and cold. Inside, tucked into the fingers, was a little twist of paper. I eased it out. It was the corner of a trail map, the part with the "You Are Here" circle, and the little printed man with a walking stick. Someone had written help across it in pencil and then half erased it. Not scribbled out so it couldn't be read. Just blurred, like the writer had started to change their mind. I bagged glove and paper with hands that shook despite the neutral, competent motions. We found the father and son an hour later, huddled in a shallow depression under a wind-thrown log, chilled, hungry, but okay. They'd lost the main trail in the storm, followed a herd path instead, realized too late. The father had the sense to make them stop walking in circles once he accepted they were turned around. "Did you leave a glove up on the bench?" I asked gently as we walked them out. The boy held up his bare hands. "I lost one yesterday," he said. "Back at the lake. Mom's gonna be mad." We brought them home. The paperwork was clean. Good outcome, no injuries. The chief clapped me on the shoulder, said, "Nice work, Halverson." That night, alone in my tiny bedroom in ranger housing, I put the glove bag on the table and just stared at it. The map corner. The half-erased word. Outside, the radio tower's beacon blinked red at its steady interval. A pulse you could feel in your teeth if you focused too much. My radio chirped once with some distant traffic. I rolled over, tried to sleep. In that thin, falling-through place just before dreaming, I heard my name in my own voice again, coming from the radio speaker even though it wasn't on. I got up and unplugged it from the wall, left it on the floor like a dead bug. There isn't a single moment when you realize you can't keep doing the job the way you've been doing it. It's more like water seeping into a boot. You ignore the first chill. You flex your toes when it gets sloshy. At some point you realize your foot is numb and you can't remember when it stopped feeling like a part of you. For me, it was a combination of small things. The way the search dogs started refusing certain gullies before the handlers even asked them to work. The way watches stopped in one clearing and ticked again 10 yards away. The way we'd hang flagging tape at the edge of a search grid and later find identical tape, cut with our brand of knife, tied in our ugly little habit knot on a tree well outside the line. The way volunteers ask the same question over and over in different seasons. Do you ever feel like the force already knows how this ends and we're just acting it out? And once in the shower after a 16-hour day, the way I realized I'd been humming under my breath without noticing. A tune I didn't recognize. A pattern of notes that made the tile feel closer than it was. I hung in there for 2 more years. Sometimes I think it was stubbornness. Sometimes I think it was an addiction to the work. There's a hit of something when you bring someone home alive. A righteousness, a relief so strong it feels like a drug. You stand in a hospital hallway with mud on your knees and smoke in your hair, watching a mother squeeze her kid's fingers, and you think, this is worth whatever it took from me. And yet, the file drawer with the unrecovered grew heavier. The private notebook grew thicker. One winter, I took it out in my small kitchen, with the rain needling the windows and the cheap apartment heater wheezing, and read the entries back to myself. Arranged objects, stale pockets, voices replayed, time refusing to behave. No answers, no unifying theory, just a pattern of almost physical, almost explainable, almost there if you tilt your head. I thought about Cal's map with its circles, about the boy's warm folded shirt, the runner's fogged watch, the brother's stick, the staged hat and bandana, the glove threaded on a branch. You can make a religion out of that if you let yourself. You can start seeing meaning in every misplaced spoon, every oddly quiet morning. You can start thinking the forest is talking to you directly, and that way lies, well, I've seen it in other rangers' eyes. People who stayed a little too long at the intersections where the maps didn't help. So I did the thing I wasn't sure I knew how to do. I left. It wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no speeches. Just a stack of forms, a nod from the chief that said he understood more than he'd say out loud, the scrape of my name card magnet sliding into a drawer instead of onto the duty board. I packed my books and my gear and the box of oddments that had accumulated in my locker over the years. Old park brochures, patched gloves, a compass with a bubble big enough to be useless. The glove with the map corner went back into evidence. The pebble I'd taken from the berry circle went back to the woods on my last patrol. I walked out there alone, placed it on the ground, and said quietly, I'm done. Whatever you are, I'm done. The air tasted normal that day. I moved inland, a town where the biggest patch of green on the map was a city park with a duck pond in a jogging loop. I got a job that still involved maps, but kept my boots mostly on pavement, municipal planning. Sidewalks, bike lanes, drainage culverts. Places where if someone gets lost, you can see them from the next block. I met someone. We rented a small house with bad carpet and 2 big maples in the yard. One winter, we replaced the carpet with cheap laminate and laughed at each other while we tried badly to cut straight lines. I hung a framed topographic of Olympic on the wall in the hallway. My partner, Erin, raised an eyebrow. You miss it? She asked. Parts, I said. Not all of it. We had a kid, a girl, She was born with a loud voice and a stubborn grip. When she learned to walk, she tottered around the living room in circles, giggling, falling over the same rug edge again and again. When she got old enough to ask what I used to do, I said, I help people find their way back. You were good at it, Aaron said once, later, when the dishes were done and the television murmured in the next room. I could tell, even before you told me the stories. I shrugged, uncomfortable with praise for things that had cut both ways. I told Aaron about some of it, not everything, the stale pockets of air, the radios echoing my voice, but enough. Dustin's bike, the brothers, the runner. She listened with the same steady expression she used when our daughter had tantrums about the unfairness of vegetables. That's a lot, she said when I finished. Do you think something was doing it? Like something out there? I thought about all the inhuman causes we've tried to pin human names on over the centuries. Gods, devils, ghosts, land spirits, aliens, fate. I think there are places where the rules are thin, I said, and people end up paying for that. Are you okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, most days. And it was true, mostly. We bought a baby monitor with a little green light that flickered when our daughter breathed. The first few nights home from the hospital, I lay awake watching that light reflecting off the ceiling. Sure it was going to stop. Sure something unseen would find its way even into this small, normal room. It didn't. Once though, around 3 a.m, as the monitor clicked and hissed itself awake to our daughter's small snuffling, there was a half second where the static sounded like a radio squawk, a chirp just like the ones that had punctuated my sleep for over a decade. For that half second, my brain put my body back on a mossy bench with stale air and stones shifting underfoot. My heart kicked, my hands curled on the sheets. Then our daughter let out a burp of outrage, and the spell broke. I got up. I walked down the hallway. I picked her up and felt her small, animal warmth. She smelled like milk and that weird, clean baby smell that never quite goes away from your memory once you've known it. Hey, kiddo, I whispered. You're okay. She stared up at me, pupils huge, then yawned, overwhelmed by her own existence. People like the idea of closure. They want stories that end with answers. Monsters slain, mysteries solved, circles drawn around the danger so you can avoid it next time. I don't have that. The mountain is still there. People still go into those woods and don't come out. I still occasionally read headlines online about missing hiker in Washington Park and feel my stomach fold. I know there are new names now, new rangers with their own notebooks, their own lists of anomalies they don't quite share. Whatever lives in those pockets, or moves through them, or brushes against them, I didn't beat it, bargain with it, or even really understand it. I just stepped out of its way. Sometimes I feel guilty about that. Sometimes on clear days when we drive out of town and you can see the faint blue-gray humps of distant hills on the horizon, I catch myself driving a little too far. Past the exit I mean to take, past the safety of strip malls and gas stations, toward a line of darker green that means real forest. And sometimes I turn off, park at a trailhead that smells like sunscreen and car exhaust, walk a mile in on a wide, manicured loop where joggers bounce by with earbuds in, where kids throw gravel, where the biggest hazard is a route someone might trip on. I'll stop where the path dips into a patch of trees, close my eyes and taste the air. Most days it just tastes like leaves and mud and city dust. One time, only once so far, I tasted something older. A hint of sweetness, like rot buried deep. A sense of the ground breathing very slowly. For a second, the sound of traffic on the nearby road thinned, and I heard distant water instead, and the whisper of a radio frame clicking open. I opened my eyes. The light on the path was ordinary. A woman jogged past with a golden retriever snuffling the verge. A kid rode a too-small bike with training wheels, helmet askew. I stepped back onto the paved part of the path. I don't know what waits in those circles on Cal's map. I don't know if they're mouths, or magnets, or just bruises in the world where something pressed too hard once and never fully lifted. I do know this. I spent 14 years trying to draw lines around places I didn't understand. The best I could do, in the end, was step out of them and build a life where my job is to keep my circle small and intact. Our daughter is 5 now. She loves maps. We spread them on the floor and trace rivers with our fingers. When she asks what's over there, in the big green space with no roads drawn, I tell her, trees, rivers, animals. Can we go? She asks. Someday, I say, because I won't lie to her. But not the deep parts, the nice parts, the parts with boardwalks and ice cream afterward. She accepts this for now. Kids are good at trusting limits until they learn what it feels like to push them. Sometimes when she's asleep and the house is breathing in its slow, human way, I take out my old notebook. The cover is frayed now, corners bent. The last few pages are blank. I flip through the lists, the objects, the times, the glitched radios and stale pockets, and dogs lying down with their paws over their faces. I let the memories rise and settle like silt in a jar. Then I close it. I don't burn it. I don't throw it away. I don't treat it as sacred scripture either. It's just a thing that happened. A thing I wrote during a time of my life when I thought that knowing more would save me. Now when the kettle whistles in the kitchen, and my daughter yells that she can't find her favorite socks, and Aaron laughs at a joke I've already forgotten, I let the not knowing sit where it is, out there, beyond the horizon. The mountain keeps its own appointments. I don't need to attend them anymore. That's the closest thing to peace I've found. Story 2 I named. My name is Miguel Ortega, law enforcement ranger at Rocky Mountain National Park. I've been here 8 years. Before that, I studied to be a priest until a failed exorcism scared me out of the collar and into the uniform. Today is October 31st, 2025, and I am watching a demon learn how to use a human body like a new toy. She isn't supposed to be alive. Her name, when it still mattered, was Rachel, backpacker from Fort Collins, 32. I found her an hour ago, hunched by the trail, barefoot in the snow, nails ripped bloody where she'd been clawing at the frozen ground. At first I thought hypothermia. She was naked to the waist, skin turned marbled purple, lips pale. Then she looked up at me and said, "Miguelito, no llores," in my dead mother's voice. I dropped my radio. I've heard all kinds of shock gibberish as a ranger. People begging God, mixing languages, thanking me like I'm an angel. This wasn't that. This was my mother's exact cadence, the way she used to say it when I skinned my knees. And Rachel's mouth didn't match the words. Her lips moved out of sync, forcing sounds through a throat that didn't want to make them. I told myself it was stress, grief, old ghosts. The brain will do anything to make a pattern. Then her eyes rolled, not up, back. The pupils disappeared as if yanked inward. Only the whites remained, veined black like someone had injected ink into them. I called for EMS, voice shaking. The radio hissed with static, then something breathed between the bursts, slow and wet. "Unit 23 to base, you brought me here," the radio said. My voice, wrong timing, like a bad recording. Rachel cocked her head, her jaw unhinged another inch with a soft crack. "It's rude to ignore," she whispered. This time it sounded like my Uncle Diego, the priest who died during that exorcism back in New Mexico. A 10-year-old boy convulsing on the kitchen floor, Latin phrases half finished, the reek of vomit and sulfur. My uncle's rosary snapped like thread. I left the church after we buried them both. I told myself it was trauma, coincidence, undiagnosed epilepsy, anything but what I'd seen. I drove as far as I could from that town, signed up for seasonal work in Colorado, fell in love with mountains that didn't talk. For 8 years, I treated every weirdness in this park like weather, terrain, human error. Now I'm watching something curl Rachel's spine backward until I hear vertebrae pop. I managed to hogtie her, more for her safety than mine, I told myself then, and drag her under a spruce away from the wind. She shouldn't have had the strength to fight me. She did anyway, muscles bunching under skin that slid too much, like there was space between it and the meat. She's quieter now, breathing in a ragged rhythm that doesn't match the rise and fall of her chest. I'm only a quarter mile from the old stone shelter by the lock. If I can get her there before the storm hits, maybe, she starts humming. It's the tune we used to use for the Gloria at my childhood church, except the notes are all wrong, bent. Every time it reaches the word excelsis, her neck jerks and her teeth clack together hard enough that one snaps. A fleck of white lands on my sleeve. I can't leave her. I can't carry her. I can't stay here. I take out my notebook. Somewhere in the shaking mess of a hand, I still remember how to write the word. Exorcismus. Because that's what this is. It started 3 days ago. This is just the part where it's finally honest about it. 3 days ago, the first call came in like any other. Late return from the Sky Pond Trail. 2 college guys from Denver. Fit, cocky, the sort who jog past, use extreme caution signs. We found them at dusk halfway back to the trailhead. One walking, one being half dragged. The injured one, Logan, had deep claw marks down his chest. 4 parallel tracks like a giant hand had raked him. The other, Travis, kept insisting a mountain lion dropped out of a tree onto their camp. Except the scratches were too neat, too evenly spaced. And I've seen what a cougar attack looks like. It isn't tidy. Cougar, I said anyway, because that's easier to write in a report than invisible thing that spoke Latin. While I examined the wounds, Logan grabbed my wrist. His pupils ballooned, swallowing the hazel. Exuro, he rasped. That word again, the one the dying boy had screamed in my uncle's kitchen. I looked it up later in the old Rituale Romanum. I burn. Where did you hear that? I asked, dumb question that he didn't answer. He fainted, froth bubbling at his lips. He was DOA by the time EMS got him to Estes Park. I dismissed it as a coincidence. Latin roots are everywhere. Maybe he'd been a lapsed altar boy like me. Then the scratches on his chest started to blister at the edges, turning into weeping sigils I recognized from the margins of my uncle's old exorcism manual. I only saw them once when the coroner pulled back the sheet to show me the wound pattern. They looked like letters written with a red-hot needle. Night 1, I chalked up to adrenaline. Night 2, I woke to something whispering in the corner of my cabin, too low to parse. The next morning, my crucifix, buried years ago in a drawer under socks and old pay stubs, was hanging above my bed. I live alone. I tried to rationalize it. Sleepwalking, a prank. Old rangers get bored too. Then came Rachel. She was camping alone up near Glacier Gorge, site number 14. When I checked the log, her name was underlined in shaky pen, like whoever wrote it had been cold. No one saw her leave the site. No one heard anything except the wind. 2 odd things stood out when I got there. Her tent zipper was halfway open, frost tracing the teeth like tiny bones. And someone had drawn a circle of ash around the fire pit. Not a loose ring like you get after a burn, but a deliberate line, unbroken, as wide as a person lying down. There were symbols scratched into the frozen ground outside the circle. Curved lines, intersecting crosses, shapes like open mouths. Somewhere in the back of my head, a catechism I tried to forget stirred. The old stuff. The medieval panic about witches' circles and unclean spirits. This thing is older than that. I can feel it. Rachel coughs, dragging me back to now. Her spine arches again. Her lips pull back, gums receding to show teeth too long, as if they're being pushed out from inside. The veins along her neck darken, spreading like ink in water. Listen to me, I say. I'm Miguel. I'm going to get you out. She stops moving. Her head snaps toward me with such speed I hear tendons creak. You already did, she says. You opened the door when you begged for your uncle's life. I was 14, kneeling in a kitchen that smelled like bleach and bile, praying into tile that never answered. Please, I whisper now, but I'm not sure who I'm talking to. She laughs. Her tongue is too long, black at the tip, like it's charred. Snow starts to fall, sudden and heavy. Each flake that lands on her skin sizzles, hissing into steam. I drag her. I don't remember deciding to. I just remember the brutal ache in my shoulders, and the way her body feels both limp and stiff at the same time, like dragging a mannequin filled with sand. The stone shelter appears out of the trees like an altar someone forgot to finish. My breath billows in panic bursts. My radio crackles. Unit 23, status? Dispatch asks. Before I can speak, another voice overlays hers, deeper, impossible. Confite or Deo omnipotenti, it says. I confess to Almighty God. Rachel starts reciting the rest of the prayer at double speed, lips barely moving. Blood leaks from her ears. I haul her inside, kick the door shut, and shove my pack against it. The shelter smells wrong. Old soot, wet stone, and underneath that, something sweet and rotten. There are carvings in the walls I don't remember from the reconstructions we did 5 years ago. Spirals, crosses turned on their side, names scratched and then scratched out again. In the far corner, someone has painted a symbol in what looks like dried rust. It's the same sigil that burned on Logan's chest. I realize with a cold clarity that whatever this is, it has been here longer than the park, longer than the Forest Service, longer than the treaties that carved this place up and pushed out the Ute and Arapaho who walked these valleys first. I remember a conversation with an elder from the Southern Ute tribe after a public meeting. The others had drifted away. He'd looked past me toward Long's Peak, his eyes half-lidded. There are places you don't camp, he'd said. We didn't, anyway. Not because of bears or storms, because something else already lived there. We called them the Torn Mouths. They liked to wear us. I'd filed it away under folklore and gone back to my spreadsheets. Now I watch a torn mouth try on Rachel's face. My chest burns. I look down and see a line reddening over my heart, the skin rising as if something is writing from inside. It curves, crosses itself. Another sigil. No, I say, and my voice breaks on the word. I dig in my pack with clumsy fingers and pull out the thing I swore I'd never need again. My uncle's old, battered ritual. I've carried it for years, just in case, never admitting even to myself what case I meant. The pages fall open to the right like it remembers my hands. Outside, something slams into the shelter. Stone dust flakes from the ceiling. The door jumps in its frame. A low, grinding voice seeps through the cracks, layered with whispers in languages I don't know, and one I do. Spanish, old country. The way my abuela spoke when she thought no one was listening. You don't know what you're calling, it says. Rachel's body lurches upward. The ropes dig into her, then snap one by one with soft pops, fibers tearing like tendons. Her arms jerk free, elbows bending the wrong way, hands folding back on themselves until the fingers touch the tops of her wrists. She rises, feet not quite touching the ground. Her eyes are pits now. Not black like ink, black like absence, like someone punched holes straight through to whatever's on the other side. The mark on my chest sears. It feels like a hot nail pressing deeper with every beat of my heart. I begin the prayer. It comes out haltingly at first, the Latin rusty, catching on my tongue. The words taste like dust and copper, but they're there. The old invocations, the appeals, the commands. Rachel convulses, the thing wearing her snarls, her lips splitting at the corners, teeth lengthening in a line of cracking enamel. The shelter walls pulse, the symbols glow dull red, as if lit from behind. Parasitic faith, it spits. You learn new names for old hungers and thought that made them yours. The storm outside crescendos. Wind screams through the cracks. Snow blasts in under the door, swirling in patterns that look almost like letters. I keep going. I force the words out over the rising pressure in my skull, over the pounding of my pulse in my ears, over the part of me that wants to kneel and let it in just to stop the burning. Incident 1 was Logan. Incident 2 was Rachel. Those were just the opening moves. Incident 3 is me. The demon lunges. Its hand, Rachel's hand from the elbow down, stretches, bones telescoping. Fingers spear toward my face. I jump sideways. The nails graze my cheek, tearing 4 parallel tracks. The skin around them sizzles, blisters forming instantly. The smell of my own cooking flesh fills the small room. I slam my back against the far wall, book clutched like a shield. My head hits stone. Lights pop behind my eyes. By the sign of the cross, I gasp. I command you. It laughs again. The sound shudders the air. You command nothing, it says. You are already marked. Your uncle fed us with his fear. You came here wearing his invitation. The mark on my chest throbs in time with its words. I realize too late that this isn't random. Whatever this is, it has followed my bloodline from that kitchen in New Mexico to this mountain in Colorado. And I brought it right into a place the Ute elder told us never to sleep. Stone shelters make good traps. For us, not for it. The only thing I can think of is the lake. There's a tarn above here, a small glacial pool tucked in a rock bowl. The same elder had mentioned it once, almost in passing. A place his people used to leave offerings. Not a shrine, not exactly. More like a neutral ground, he'd said. A place where things could cross without staying. If I can get it there, if I can drag whatever this is to water that remembers older names, Rachel's body jerks toward me, limbs flailing like a horrible puppet. I duck under her reaching arm, shoulder her hard, and run. We hit the door together. The latch gives with a scream. We tumble into the whiteout. The world is reduced to cold and panic and pain. The wind claws at us. The trail disappears. I follow shapes I know by heart. A bent fir, a jut of rock, the vague dip where the path climbs. Behind me, it shrieks through Rachel's mouth. The sound makes the trees shudder. Snow melts in a radius around her feet, revealing black, wet earth that steams. My lungs burn. Every breath feels like inhaling knives. The mark on my chest is a live coal. It throbs in eager anticipation, like whatever's on the other side wants out just as badly as this thing wants in. I crest the last rise, and there it is. The tarn, a dark oval amid white, edges rimed with new ice. The surface is still, impossibly still given the wind, like a piece of sky that fell and froze. I drag her to the edge. She's lighter than she should be now, like whatever is inside has eaten away the weight. I flip the ritual open with numb fingers and start the final commands. Not the sanctioned, pretty ones. The ugly, desperate phrases scribbled in my uncle's margins. The ones he wasn't supposed to use but did anyway that night when the boy started speaking in 3 voices at once. Rachel stops struggling. For a heartbeat, she hangs there, half over the water, head lolling. Her eyes clear. For the first time since I found her, I see Rachel. Not the thing in her. Not my mother, not my uncle. Just a terrified woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. Please, she whispers, her own voice thin and raw. Don't let it. Her words cut off with a choking gurgle as something bulges under the skin of her throat, pressing outward. I shove. We go into the water together. Cold obliterates everything. The world becomes pressure and black in a roar that might be the storm or might be screaming. The mark on my chest flares into pure pain. It feels like something tearing free, like a hooked tooth being ripped out of bone. In the dark under the ice, something else moves. Not the demon, something slower, older. It presses against my skin like a huge, smooth hand. For a second, the burning stops. There is only silence and weight, and the distant echo of words I don't know but instinctively can understand. Not here. Not all at once. I break the surface, gagging, clawing for air. I'm on the shore somehow. My hands are torn bloody from the rocks. My breath comes in hoarse sobs. Rachel is floating in the middle of the tarn. Her body is wrong. Limbs too long, head tilted back so far her face points straight at the sky. Her mouth is open in a silent scream. Her eyes are back to white, but the black veins are gone. The snow around us has melted in a wide ring. Steam rises in tendrils. Somewhere in the tree line, something laughs. Farther away now. Not gone. Just waiting. The mark on my chest is still there. Raised, angry, but no longer hot. If I touch it, it pulses faintly under my fingers, like a second heartbeat. I get to my feet on legs that don't want to hold me, stumble back toward the shelter, toward the trail, toward the radio. They'll send teams. They'll find a woman dead of hypothermia in a tarn she had no reason to visit. They'll see my wounds, my half-frozen clothes, the way my skin reddens in sigils when they warm me up. They'll write cougar, storm, exposure, words that make sense on forms. They won't write what I know, that I dragged something old and hungry into water that was never meant for it, that something else intervened for reasons I can't pretend to understand, and that none of it is over. Because as I limp down the trail, the radio at my shoulder crackles to life. Battery long dead, no indicator light. Miguel, my uncle's voice says calmly, "We aren't finished." I click the mic with shaking fingers. "Yeah," I say, not sure who I'm talking to anymore. I know. The wind dies for one breath, like the whole mountain is listening. Then it starts again.